After he died, Steve Marriott's son finally admits what we all suspected. Steve Marriott, the rock and roll sensation with a voice that could move mountains, fronted both Small Faces and Humble Pie, leaving us with unforgettable musical masterpieces. However, he suddenly became broke, began stealing, and eventually met a tragic end. But what drove such a legend into the depths of darkness? After his death, his son came forward to confirm what many had suspected all along. Steve Marriott, the legendary rock musician, was born on the 30th of January, 1947, in East Ham Memorial Hospital in Plashet, East Ham, England. His early life was a whirlwind of ups and downs, starting from the moment he came into the world 3 weeks premature, weighing just 1.9 kilograms. But that wasn't the end of the tragedy he faced during the first week he came into the world. He developed jaundice and had to spend 4 weeks in the hospital before he was strong enough to go home. It was clear from the start that Marriott was destined for a life full of surprises. Coming from a working-class background, Marriott's childhood was anything but ordinary. His father, Bill, worked as a printer and later owned a jellied eel stall called Bill's Eels outside the Ruskin Arms Hotel. Not stopping there, Bill also dabbled in selling pie and mash. It's safe to say that Marriott inherited his father's entrepreneurial spirit and love for music. Despite the rocky start, Marriott's early years were filled with creativity and passion. His father bought him a ukulele and harmonica, igniting Marriott's love for music. Instead of simply strumming along, Marriott took it upon himself to master these instruments, showcasing his determination and talent from a young age. But Marriott's musical journey didn't stop there. He showed an early interest in singing and performing, often entertaining passers-by and local bus stops to earn some extra pocket money. His natural charisma and undeniable talent didn't go unnoticed, as he even managed to win talent contests during the family's annual holiday to Jaywick Holiday Camp near Clacton-on-Sea. It was clear that Marriott was destined for the spotlight. At the tender age of 12, Marriott pulled off something truly remarkable. He formed his first band with his school friends Nigel Chapin and Robin Andrews. They went through a series of name changes, starting with the Wheels, then becoming the Coronation Kids, and finally settling on the Mississippi Five. This band was what set the stage for his future success in the music industry. Their performances were the talk of the town, as they rocked the local coffee bars in East Ham and even got a spot to perform every Saturday morning at the Asoldo Cinema in Manor Park. But besides his musical talent, Marriott's mischievous nature was no secret, as his dear mother Kay fondly recalls him as a cheeky and hyperactive child. His neighbors on Stone Road could attest to his penchant for playing pranks and practical jokes, making him a well-known figure in the community. However, there was one particular incident that left a lasting impression on young Marriott. During his time at the local Sandringham Secondary Modern School, Marriott found himself at the center of a fiery controversy. Rumor circulated that he had deliberately set the classroom on fire, although he denied any involvement in the incident. Despite his rebellious nature, Marriott was still adored for his undeniable talent. And just when it seemed like trouble was his middle name, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. A golden opportunity came knocking at his door, and it was all thanks to his father, Bill Marriott. One day, Bill stumbled upon an advertisement in a London newspaper seeking a replacement for the Artful Dodger in Lionel Bart's renowned musical Oliver. Without a second thought, he secretly applied for his son to audition, keeping Steve completely in the dark about the whole affair. At the tender age of 13, Marriott found himself standing in front of the formidable Lionel Bart, ready to showcase his vocal prowess. With confidence and a hint of mischief in his eyes, he sang 2 iconic songs, Who's Sorry Now by Connie Francis and Oh Boy by Buddy Holly. Bart was utterly captivated by Steve's raw talent, and after that fateful audition, Steve Marriott's life was never the same. Marriott had a deep love for singing. It was his true calling, his heart's desire. But his parents had dreams of their own for the young Marriott. They wanted him to become an actor, and they made sure he knew it. So on one hand, he had the unwavering support of his family as long as he pursued acting. On the other hand, his heart yearned for the stage, not as an actor, but as a singer. With his father's help, Marriott's acting career took flight. But the financial burden of private school fees loomed over him like a dark cloud. It was decided that the school would deduct the fees from any acting work they found for him. A compromise, yes, but at what cost? As time went on, Marriott found himself at a crossroads. He had to make a choice: follow his parents' dreams and continue acting, or follow his own heart and pursue his love for music. It was a tough decision, to say the least. The weight of expectation versus personal fulfillment tugged at his soul. In the end, Marriott couldn't deny his true passion any longer. He turned his back on acting and embraced his first love, music. But as with any great decision, there were consequences. His parents were devastated, and there was a family rift. Marriott may have left the comfort of his family home, but he had determined to make it on his own. With the support of friends, he embarked on a new chapter in his life. It was a fresh start, although without the safety net of his family's approval. And so, Marriott's journey continued. Despite the initial setbacks, he persevered. In 1963, he landed a solo deal with Decca Records and released his first single, Give Her My Regards. Unfortunately, the single wasn't commercially successful. But everyone has to start somewhere, right? And for Marriott, giving up was simply not on the table. Marriott tried his hands on several things. He formed a band, took his single around several major record companies, but nobody seemed interested, and the song never saw the light of day. But the final tragedy came when Marriott was dropped from the band. And guess what their reason was? They claimed he was just too young to take on the role of lead singer. But as the saying goes, every ending is just the beginning of something new. It all began on a fateful day in 1964, when Marriott crossed paths with Ronnie Lane and the youthful drummer Kenny Jones at the Albion in Raynham. Little did he know that this chance meeting would lead to the formation of one of the most influential bands in British rock history. After parting ways with his previous band, The Moments, Marriott found himself working at the J60 Music Bar in Manor Park. It was there that fate intervened once again as he ran into Lane, who was in search of a bass guitar. As the two musicians bonded over their shared love of rare American R&B records, it became clear that they were destined to make music together. With the addition of Jones, the trio solidified their bond, and the Small Faces were born. The band's name, suggested by Marriott's friend Annabelle, perfectly captured their essence. Standing at no more than 5 foot 6 inches tall, the members were indeed small faces in stature, and their reputation as respected mods with the English mod culture only added to the significance of the name. Under the guidance of Don Arden, the Small Faces quickly rose to prominence within the mod scene. Their debut single, What You Gonna Do About It, shot up the UK singles chart, solidifying their status as a band to be reckoned with. Even rock icon Robert Plant was among their devoted fans, often spotted at their early gigs and even running small errands for them. However, despite their initial success, the band faced its share of challenges and eventually went their separate ways. But what really happened? Back in the 60s, there was a band that rocked the world with their vital and immensely enjoyable contributions to rock and roll, the Small Faces. They may not be as frequently mentioned these days, but their impact on the music scene was undeniable. With hits like Itchy-Coo Park, Lazy Sunday, All or Nothing, Tin Soldier, and the iconic concept album Ogden's Nut Gone Flake, they solidified their status as musical geniuses. And at the heart of it all was the late, great Steve Marriott, whose talent knew no bounds. However, every great story has its ups and downs, and the Small Faces were no exception. It all began to unravel after the release of Ogden's Nut Gone Flake in 1968. Marriott had grand plans for the band's evolution and proposed bringing in ex-Hurt frontman Peter Frampton. But McLaughlin, Jones, and Lane were not on board with this idea. Marriott began to feel that the band had hit a creative wall and started spending more time with Frampton and Greg Ridley. At this time, he knew he had to make a move. Then, on one fateful New Year's Eve live performance in 1968, Marriott dramatically stormed off stage, yelling, "I quit." And just like that, the Small Faces were no more. As 1969 rolled in, the final Small Faces double LP, The Autumn Stone, was released post-breakup, a bittersweet reminder of what once was. On the other hand, Marriott was doing what he knew best, joining a band. After parting ways with Small Faces in 1969, Marriott found himself joining forces with Peter Frampton, drummer Jerry Shirley, and bassist Greg Ridley to form the powerhouse rock band Humble Pie. Finally, Marriott had the artistic freedom he craved, a stark contrast to his days in Small Faces, where commercial pressures and individual differences stifled his creativity. But as they say, the road to success is never smooth. After their first American tour, the band returned to Britain only to find out that their record label, Immediate, had gone into liquidation. A lesser band might have thrown in the towel at this point, but not Humble Pie. They quickly regrouped, signed with A&M Records, and set their sights on conquering the lucrative U.S. market. Humble Pie embarked on a relentless touring schedule, completing about 19 tours in the U.S. alone over the next 3 years. But as success and fame grew, so did the cracks within the band. Some close to MARRIOTT noticed a change in his personality, attributing it to the grueling demands of touring in America. It wasn't long before MARRIOTT's personal demons began to surface. MARRIOTT, like so many before and after him, found himself swept up in the whirlwind of fame, fortune, and the pressures that come with it. But instead of turning to therapy or meditation, he had a rather unique coping mechanism, disappearing into the studio for days on end. And we say disappear, we mean it. No sleep, strange characters coming and going, and all sorts of chemicals floating around. It was a crazy scene, and even the nicest of people can get caught up in it. Of course, all those chemicals eventually took their toll. MARRIOTT found himself addicted, unable to break free from their grip. Years of excessive alcohol and substance abuse left their mark, with signs of mild schizophrenia starting to rear its head. His destructive addiction to coke and alcohol during those wild American tours in the early 1970s truly sealed his fate. And as so often is the case, his personal life suffered as well. His marriages crumbled under the weight of his addiction, and it's widely believed that his premature death was a direct result of his destructive lifestyle. Steve MARRIOTT, the legendary musician and frontman of Small Faces and Humble Pie, experienced a tumultuous journey from fame and fortune to financial struggles and personal turmoil. After releasing his debut solo album in 1976, MARRIOTT returned to his homeland of Britain, filled with hope and joy as he and his wife welcomed their first child into the world. But little did they know, this was just the beginning of a downward spiral into a life of hardship and struggle. The once wealthy musician found himself reduced to desperate measures, resorting to stealing vegetables from a nearby field just to put food on the table. The money from his past successes had all but vanished, leaving him with nothing but empty pockets and a heavy heart. Despite these setbacks, MARRIOTT found himself back in the spotlight when the re-release singles of his band's hits garnered success. This led to a reformation of Small Faces, but unfortunately, their albums failed to make an impact both critically and commercially. And what did MARRIOTT get out of this ill-fated venture? Not a single penny. His hard-earned earnings were mercilessly snatched away to free him from old management contracts. Forced to sell his beloved home and move to a modest house in London, MARRIOTT's fall from grace was complete. The once celebrated musician now found himself struggling to make ends meet, a far cry from the life of luxury he had once known. But the misfortunes didn't end there. Just when MARRIOTT thought he had hit rock bottom, he was hit with the news that he owed £100,000 in back taxes from his Humble Pie days. And who was to blame for this financial fiasco? None other than his manager, D. Anthony. It was one calamity after another, a never-ending cycle of despair. Down on his luck, with no home to call his own, MARRIOTT found himself scraping the bottom of the barrel. Quite literally, in fact. He resorted to collecting empty glass bottles, trading them in for a tiny sum just to make ends meet. MARRIOTT's life took a turn for the worse in the latter half of 1981. His marriage was on the brink of collapse, and to add insult to injury, he suffered a wrist injury in an accident and was hospitalized with a suspected burst ulcer while opening for Judas Priest, leading to the disintegration of the new Humble Pie lineup. After a failed attempt at a stable relationship with Manon Piercy, MARRIOTT's brief marriage to Tony Poulton ended as well. It seemed success and fame, and even love, were not in the cards for him, leading to some rather drastic decisions in later years. MARRIOTT started turning down lucrative deals with big names in the music industry, such as EMI, and his bandmates grew resentful, leading to the disbandment of Packet of Three. Taking a break from the music scene, MARRIOTT's health and appearance deteriorated, leaving little resemblance to his former mod icon self from the swinging 60s. Sadly, MARRIOTT's final moments were also marred by a series of unfortunate events. As the story goes, MARRIOTT had just returned from the United States, where he'd been laying down tracks for an upcoming album with none other than Peter Frampton. But it seems that the trip had taken its toll on the fiery singer, as reports indicate that he was not in the best of spirits during the flight back to the UK. In fact, it's said that he and his friend Poulton had a serious argument. Upon their return, the duo, along with a mutual friend, made their way to one of Marriott's favorite haunts, the Straw Hat in Sawbridgeworth. Here, Marriott took in too much liquid and found himself in a less than pleasant mood. After dinner, they went to their friend's house for the night, but it seems that sleep did not bring an end to their quarrel. In fact, it only seemed to fan the flames of their disagreement. In the early hours of the morning, Marriott made a hasty exit, leaving his friends behind. They had no idea that this would be the last time with him. The next news they heard broke their heart. Marriott's cottage was on fire. The investigation into the fire revealed a heartbreaking sequence of events. It's believed that in his exhausted state, Marriott lit a cigarette in bed and fell into a deep sleep, unaware of the danger he was in. The loss of Steve Marriott was deeply felt by his family, friends, and fans around the world. But one can't help but wonder what Marriott's son Toby had to say about his father. While we may never know the full extent of their relationship, we can only imagine the mixed emotions Toby must have towards the man who was both a musical legend and a flawed human being. Toby Marriott is not just a spitting image of his father, Steve Marriott, but he also inherited the same fiery and soulful vocals that made his father a beloved figure in the music industry. However, let's not overlook the fact that Toby has worked hard to carve out his own unique tone and sound, distinct from his father's legacy. While Steve's talent came naturally and instinctively, Toby possesses his own exciting and distinctive vocal style. When asked about being the son of Steve Marriott and pursuing a music career of his own, Toby admits that it can be a bit of a drag. He humorously describes the 3 stages of dealing with the attention, from loving it to despising it, and finally learning to just roll with it. He even confesses to using aliases at times to escape the shadow of his famous surname. Toby recalls a time when a record executive expected him to sound like the Small Faces or Humble Pie simply because of his lineage. In a world where expectations can be as heavy as a family name, Toby remains determined to establish his own musical identity, separate from his father's legendary career. However, there's a recent battle brewing within the Marriott family. A brewing controversy in the music world has caught the attention of renowned artists and fans alike. The source of the commotion? AI-generated voices and the unauthorized release of so-called new recordings. This has sparked a collective effort from a group of esteemed artists, including Robert Plant, David Gilmour, Peter Frampton, and Bryan Adams, along with the children and bandmates of the late Steve Marriott, who put an end to the release of these questionable recordings. The controversy stems from the fact that these AI-generated recordings are not only incomplete, but also unauthorized by the majority of Marriott's closest kin. What has further fueled the fire is the involvement of Marriott's third wife, Tony Marriott, who initiated and sanctioned these recordings despite being married to him for less than 2 years before his passing. Molly Marriott, one of Marriott's children, expressed her dismay in a statement, revealing that the surviving family members and bandmates are vehemently opposed to the release of this AI solo album. With no will in place, British law dictates that Tony Marriott has full control over the estate, leaving Marriott's children and bandmates powerless in this situation. The crux of the matter lies in the fear that this AI-generated album would tarnish Marriott's legacy as one of the greatest vocalists of their generation. Known for his raw and powerful voice, it's clear that those closest to him believe that this release is more about money than preserving his artistry and legacy. So what will happen next? Will the music legends and Marriott's family be able to put a stop to this controversial album? Stay tuned for more updates. In the meantime, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories about your favorite icons.